So hi everyone and welcome back to the StudyTube channel. My name is V and for today's video I'm going to be talking all about femininity in ancient Greece and Rome, all about women, females, how they lived, how they navigated society, politics, religion and all of that jazz within ancient Greece and Rome. But I'm going to be talking from the viewpoint of a student who is simply revising her work and teaching you guys something. I do not have a full degree in this just yet, so if I do get anything wrong, please do forgive me. Do let me know in the comments, of course, because it's great for revision for me to know where I've gone wrong, where I've gone right. But this is just me telling you my thoughts about the things that I enjoyed learning about in my studies. And yeah, so please don't be too hard on me. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself last time, I think, and people were asking in the comments. I study classical archaeology and ancient history at Oxford University. I'm in my final year and one of the modules that I learned about last year was sexuality and gender. So here I am telling you a little bit about what I know. Let's start with nudity. Okay, so the first question that I want to throw out there is, what do nude depictions of women tell us about gender roles within Greece and Rome? And we're going to start off in the Greek side. In Greece, nudity for men was just, if you guys watched my last video, you would know, it was glorified. They were hailed as gods for walking around naked in all their muscles and glory and walking around like the defenders of Athens, of Greece, of Sparta, of wherever it may be. And they were just seen as the more naked you are, the better you are, the more heroic you are, the more brave, the more strong, the more masculine, just the more of a man that you are. And I'm not sure if on daily day-to-day lives that men actually walked around naked, you know, but I think that they wanted to be seen as men who walk around naked, because in life you have reality versus appearance, right? So you might have a way that you want to be remembered, that you want to appear, but then there's the actual reality on paper, what's actually happening day to day. Greek men, especially Athenian men, were always just shown naked because for them that was their costume. So essentially where you see a Roman man wearing full toga and armor and whatnot when they're going to battle, you see a Greek man naked because that's their version of a costume. So you don't really look at it as nudity in the sexual sense of, oh my god, you're sexually naked, but you see in the sense of you're heroically naked. So nudity for men in classical Athens, to be specific, was seen as a costume. And you can see that idea hammered in mostly by someone called Berger, who I think writes in 1972, and in his body of work he discusses this in so much depth, and it's called The Ways of Seeing. But this notion of nudity being a costume, being heroic, being all great and everything, only stopped at that one gender for men. For women it was the complete opposite, and I find this so ironic and so interesting. So in classical Athens, I'm going to stick to Athens for now because it all varies depending on each state. I don't want to just say Greek so that you guys assume that it's for every single Greek state. It was different in Sparta, in Athens, in Thebes, in Delphi, in Delos. It was all very different. So I'm just focusing on Athens right now because otherwise this video would be 5 hours long. So in Athens, in classical Athens to be specific, nudity was not applied the same way it was for men to women. Women were not seen as heroic, brave or strong if they were seen naked. If anything, it was the complete opposite. So for a woman, if you are seen naked in classical Athens, because it changes depending on the period, but in classical Athens you were seen as vulnerable, weak, in danger, or of a very lower class, i.e. a prostitute or maybe a slave. So here is what I find ironic and just boggles my mind in terms of gender roles and standards and things like that. There is this thing called a symposium where men go there and you drink, you talk about philosophy, politics. It's like it's just a man's world, right? And no women are allowed because it's not honourable for women to be there. But there is one type of women allowed, and that's called the hetairai, and they are like Athenian prostitutes, if you may. And it blows my mind because we see them naked, we see men naked in the same room, in the same party, in the same scene, same time, same everything, but their versions of nudity are seen completely different. So when you're looking at the nude man, you're like, oh yeah, well, if you were someone in that time and you were looking, I'm just talking from their perspective, you would be like, oh my god, he's so cool, he's so heroic, he's amazing. Then you look at the woman who's in the exact same stance and you're like, she's lower class, she's not well educated, she has a lower paying job, she's a hetairai, she's of an inferior standard. And it just blows my mind that the two humans in the same time, living in the same place, doing the same thing, but because of their genders it completely alters what it means. And it just shows you that nudity is subjective to who you're applying it to and what you're discussing. And also for women in Greece, in Athens, I'm sorry I keep doing that, nudity, like I said, also symbolized danger in a sense. So in things like on the Parthenon, for example, this amazing beautiful building in Athens, you see the Amazons fighting the centaurs, and they're normally these powerful female warriors, but whenever you see them partially naked or partially nude, it shows a sign of defeat, or that they've been in battle, or that they are overwhelmed or in danger. And yeah, their nudity on that is showing like, oh my god, she's in a vulnerable state. And you see the ultimate signs of weakness is when their dresses have been slit or cut, or they are revealing a part of their body. But then you see, in comparison to a defeated Amazon whose dress has been slit open or whatever, you see someone like Athena, who is the goddess of war, and she's obviously Athenian. She's the goddess of Athens, and we see her, she's always typically fully dressed, and she was born from the head or the thigh, I should know this, I've forgotten, the head or the thigh of Zeus, and she was fully dressed when she came out. And Athena is rarely ever shown in a weak position of defeat or anything of that nature, because she's hardly ever seen nude. If in fact, I don't think I've ever seen a nude Athena, but she's shown in the stance of power and just control because she has her clothing on. So nudity for women can be seen as a symbol of weakness. And then when we're shown an honorable woman, so in comparison to the Hetairai I told you about in the symposium, the naked prostitutes in Athens, you see the complete opposite on a stele, a grave stele of a woman called Hegesso Stele, and she is shown completely dressed, sitting in a domestic scene. I think she's surrounded by maybe jewelry boxes and maybe her slave or something, but she's shown as the epitome of what an honorable Greek woman would be. And the clothing itself is very symbolic of just her status. But then we see this idea of nudity change as the Hellenistic period approaches, and what you start to see, especially with the absolutely iconic, groundbreaking sculpture of Aphrodite from Knidos, who knows, I can't say it, but there's this groundbreaking sculpture of Aphrodite where she is shown nude, and that is a first. Like, she's typically shown clothed before this period, and for the first time she's shown naked, and it's not as a woman who's in a position of vulnerability, danger, fear, who's been abused, nothing. This is showing a woman who's a goddess of love, and she's completely within her power, her rights, and nothing is wrong, but she's just naked. And this completely changes the scene of nudity and art and depiction of women. Now we're going to discuss the male gaze, since we are talking about this beautiful piece of work, the Aphrodite of Knidos. I want to discuss the male gaze while we're here because it just fits, it just makes sense. So I'm going to be referencing the work of Mulvey. I think it's Laura Mulvey. She was writing in 1975, and that's the reference in case any of you guys want to go and read up on it. So she was talking about it from the perspective of film, but we can apply it to the ancient world and to various other aspects of modern day life or ancient life. And she speaks about how men always tend to play an active role 90% of the time, 95% of the time. They play an active role of being the observer, of being the watcher, of being the person consuming the content, the person who is doing the watching and is in charge of making the thing that they're watching the object of their desires. Then women, because of this, obviously they take the other role, which is the passive role of being watched, the one of being the object, the one of being observed, the one where you are at the center of someone else's like fantasies, not fantasies per se, but you are at their mercy in terms of your beauty, your desire is dependent on how the person who looks at you views you. So Mulvey insists that the ideas, images, characters, plots and stories in films are all inadvertently built on the ideas of the patriarchies, and it's also within a sexual context. So essentially everything that women do in films, well, up until the point when she was writing, was geared and centered towards the patriarchy and always being like the sexual desire or the conquest or the object to pursue or to desire. Women just always always had to play that role. Now we're going to explore nudity within Rome, and it's very, very different. It's a different outlook on this side of life, because in Rome, men don't tend to desire nudity in the way that Greek men do. And even when we're looking at sculptures of Greek rulers and, you know, the past people like Augustus, Tiberius, Nero, all of those people, you don't tend to see them naked, not in the way that you would have done with Greek rulers of the past. However, you do see nudity within women in terms of on art, and it's not, see how in Greece, just by you being naked you already can assume someone's class. You don't get the same in Rome. Now in Rome it's quite fascinating because on art you can't actually tell the difference between a prostitute and a Roman wife of honor, because they're shown naked, and nudity within Rome for women on art was acceptable. It wasn't frowned upon. It didn't show status automatically. It just was an expression of sexual desires or sexuality or of just art. It was kind of universal. Now moving on to the medical side of things. So medically, you see that women were classed as inferior to men by medical writers. They considered women to be weaker, they considered them to be less in control of their emotions, their bodily functions, all of that kind of stuff, and that we were ruled and controlled by elements external to us. So for example, when we were menstruating, they didn't understand how that worked. So in the mind of the men of that time writing medically, they said the moon controlled periods or menstruation, whatever you want to call it, and hence why we were dangerous, because our bodies were not ours, they belonged to the elements, and depending on how the weather was or how the stars were aligned, depending on how we acted. So men tended to want to try and control the women because they just felt like they were too volatile, they were too susceptible to like changing too much, and medically they believed that they were inferior. And then even historically you see that there is this Greek mythology called Pandora's box, where Pandora is told, do not touch that box, do not touch that box, do not touch that box, and then she's left alone in the house and she opens the box and evil unleashes into the world. And that's how Greek mythology writes it. But obviously in Christianity you have a similar story, but it's different people in different ways. You see that God tells Eve, do not eat the apple, do not eat the apple, do not eat the apple. She eats the apple and boom, evil is born, and hence why women have period pains, pregnancy pains, all of that kind of stuff. Apparently it began with Eve, but in Greek mythology it begins with Pandora, and this notion of women being beings that need to be controlled, contained, and watched by men all sparks from those kinds of mythological beginnings or religious beginnings. So in terms of day-to-day lives, we see that women, especially in places like Greece or Rome, they were told that their prime duty was to stay at home, manage the household, look after the children, be the bearer of babies and all that kind of stuff. And Xenophon, who's writing the Oikonomicus, he writes about how women were trained by their fathers before they went off for marriage, and that their most important role in marriage is to manage the household, look after the husband and the children, and that was it. That was their contribution to society. I guess women's lives were lived very much under the shadow of their husbands, especially in Greece. And in Greece it was a gender segregated society, so women were kept indoors, men were kept out. And then obviously when they're finished with what they're doing outside, men would go home to their wives, and women were not allowed out unless they had a male accompanying them who was from their family, or it was for a festival or for like funerals. But in Rome it's kind of a different scene. In Rome women have a little bit more power and they actually are recognized within society, whereas Greek women, they really aren't counted, whether it's socially, politically or economically. It's difficult because the sources are so male-centered. They are so driven around men, what men were doing, and they were written by men for men. And if you hear anything about women, it's from the male perspective, the elite male perspective of what they considered women thought and felt. And not all women, just talking about elite women, women who were of slave classes or lower classes. We don't even know what they were thinking or feeling, because a lot of their voices are honestly counted out. Now I just realized the time and I need to post this video for you guys at 6 p.m, so I've just cut it short, and I feel like I just didn't make any sense once again because I didn't have the structure, and I apologize. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please comment down below what you want to hear more about, and I think I have another video coming out for you guys soon, maybe in June. I know that's not soon, but it'll be here soon, and that's going to be a video on homoeroticism in ancient Greece and Rome. Hope you guys will enjoy that. Oh my god, I need to go because I need to edit this and get this this out to you guys right now. See you later, and thank you so much for watching. Bye.